Alaskans are celebrating Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month in May. Fishery work brought many here beginning in the 1800s.
I did not know any of this history when I was there. I only learned it after I retired 6 years ago when I started studying the history of the canneries.
Today, Alaskans of Asian and Pacific Island descent are an integral part of the state's communities and culture and are thriving in local business, government, and education. We'll take a look back and discuss the future right now on Alaska Insight. Asian immigrants have a long history here. The Chinese immigrants who arrived in Alaska before statehood helped grow Alaska's wild salmon industry into the international multi-billion-dollar economy that it is today. Alaska Public Media's Jeff Chen has the story.
When school let out each summer, Fred Wong, who worked as a teacher, would travel to Alaska to work in the salmon canning industry. 1 season in Ketchikan and 53 seasons on Kodiak Island. From 1953, when he was a high school student, until 2008 at the age of 73.
So that's a record for any cannery worker. It's around the clock. Eat, sleep, go to work.
Wong grew up in Portland, Oregon's Chinatown.
I'm ABC, American-born Chinese. I'm a veteran, as a matter of fact.
He worked his way up the ranks at the Alatak Cannery from fish processor to cannery foreman, at a time when there weren't many Chinese cannery workers. But just a few decades earlier, roughly 3,000 to 5,000 Chinese people worked in Alaska's canneries each year, representing a significant portion of the workforce. Economic and political conditions in China in the 1800s led thousands of people to journey across the Pacific. By the 1870s, commercial salmon fisheries emerged, and Chinese contractors would pack boats, nicknamed hell ships, with laborers bound for West Coast and Alaska canneries. They'd work the season with laborers from around the world and also indigenous to Alaska.
That dock was as cosmopolitan as Los Angeles. You look at one cannery and it just telescopes out and you have world history and all of 19th century, 20th century history going on right there.
Katie Ringsmith, also a former cannery worker, is the director of the NN Cannery History Project.
1878 to 1879, they're bringing up a Chinese workforce. So the Chinese workers were there from the very beginning. They're moving across. They're going from southeast to Cook Inlet, right there on the Kenai. Then they're going to Kodiak, and then ultimately they're in Bristol Bay by 1883, and they're importing the Chinese laborers to do every element of that work.
Across the country, competition for jobs led to anti-Chinese racism. And that's when the nation's first major race-based discriminatory immigration law was passed.
Congress passes the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, and then they make it permanent 10 years later. And so all of these Chinese have the choice of either staying or going home, and no one can come back in.
In 1903, as Chinese people were barred from entering the U.S., they were being replaced by a machine.
The invention of the iron chink was a major advance. This head chopping was once done by Chinese labor.
You know, back in 1900, you're Chinese, you're nothing. That's why they call it that.
As the existing Chinese cannery workers aged out, they were replaced by Mexican, Puerto Rican, Black, Japanese, Pacific Islander, and Filipino laborers, each with their own unique story of arrival to the American West and North. The bunkhouse and graveyard at the Diamond NN Cannery in South Naknek are some of the few indicators that Chinese laborers were once here.
What is lacking is some of the personal stories about Chinese workers.
In the 70s, James Chow, his twin brother Philip, and a couple other international students from Taiwan landed their first cannery job in Alaska.
I did not know any of this history when I was there. I only learned it after I retired 6 years ago when I started studying the history of the canneries.
Now on their website, the Chow brothers have helped document some of the stories of Chinese cannery workers, including Fred Wong's story.
Every group come to America has its own struggle. It is when we put all these stories together, it became the American story. So I think if we all understand this situation, I think we'll be able to tolerate each other better. And hopefully, future, to prevent the type of anti-Chinese, anti-Asian, or those type of extreme violence in the future.
James Chow, Fred Wong, and Katie Ringsmith each aim to share the stories of the essential workers that put food on the table and to this day bring Alaska's wild salmon to the rest of the world.
I like coho better. I just had some last night.
For Alaska Public Media, I'm Jeff Chen.
Together, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders make up the third largest ethnic group in our state, according to 2020 census data. Joining me to describe the rich history and outlook for the future is Lucy Hansen. Lucy is the president of the Polynesian Association of Alaska. Edric Carrillo is the president of the Filipino Community Incorporated in Juneau, and Kengo Nagaoka is a community organizer in Anchorage. Thanks all of you for being with us this evening. So nice to have you all with me and here. And before I start asking some questions, I wondered if any of you, after seeing that story, have any thoughts or kind of reflections about it and where the country was at that time, especially some of that historical footage that even for me, not of Asian descent, was sort of like a gut punch, listening to some of that and thinking about those kinds of racist policies that were put in place by Congress, the Exclusion Act. Any thoughts that you'd like to share about looking at some of that and thinking about how that is different today or what isn't different today?
I could speak to that a little bit.
Please do, Kengo.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for having us on here, and thank you to Jeff Chen for highlighting that story. Growing up in Fairbanks, I also did not grow up learning about the history of Asian and Pacific Islander people here, and it's just now that I'm sort of starting to uncover all these stories and histories and movements that people are part of that have really sort of set the stage for how we're able to live life today. So I think it's just so important that we, reclaim these histories and also kind of, our young people talking about this too.
Absolutely, even though it's somewhat painful, especially hearing some of the terms that were used and understanding that these policies were put in place. You're right, it is so important to learn about them so that we can avoid those mistakes going forward.
And Lori, if I might tune in as well,
please.
Just following with Kengo, is I'm still learning about this as well. I went my entire life without really having that history or knowledge being shared until I had to personally do a deep dive, or I had relatives that were informing me of some of just the atrocities that were taking place or just the overt racism. And I think that we've gone a good way forward, but I think we still have a lot of work to do, and part of that is educating and advocating for the AAPI community. Absolutely,
and you're so right. There is a lot of work to do, as we've seen some very troubling indications recently as we'll be talking about. Edric, I want to stay with you. In an earlier interview, you said that recognition of months dedicated to Asian history, it's okay, but you kind of have an aversion to putting people in boxes. So talk a little about that.
Yeah, so, I think that it's a very nice gesture to have, months recognizing the importance of the AAPI community and others that played a huge part in American history. But I think that we have to, really move towards, just understanding where each other come from and learning from other people's culture. And by that, we could expand our base knowledge to have a better understanding of one another. And, I think that it's great that we have a month, but honestly, I think that we should have a whole year, just trying to understand and learn each other within our own communities and beyond.
Absolutely. It should be a daily process, not just a month. Lucy, how about for you? What are your thoughts about this? From your perspective, do these specific months that are kind of carved out to highlight various cultures, do they really help educate others and bring people together? Do you see signs of that? Or what are the positives that come out of these kinds of celebrations?
Yes, thank you for asking me the question, because I also, as one of the one that hosts our Pacific Island Culture Awareness Month in Anchorage once every year, but COVID stopped us from doing this. But I think that is very important, and I think that would be the only way that our community will understand each other, is to come and share and be a part of it, is to provide those monthly history events or just education piece, because as we saw on what it was preview, back in the days, our elders that passed on that had brought this to Alaska, I really, it touches me, because they fought for so hard to be recognized this special moment, and still we still at the point that we still don't understand really, even our youth, even our young kids don't even completely fully understand what their elders have gone through. So I thank them for bringing that history in for us to learn and for us to teach on to our young kids. And I believe that having those events every month for each culture, not just our Pacific and our Asian and Pacific Islander, but also other culture as well, for us to understand each other and be respectful for each other's culture. And thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lucy. Kengo, you're a person of Japanese descent who grew up in Fairbanks. You work closely with youth. What have you noticed about the way different generations of Asian American and Pacific Islanders view themselves within the community?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, ever since I moved to Anchorage a couple of years back, I've kind of connected with a group of young Asian American and Pacific Islander folks through a group called ACAPITA, the Alaska Asian Pacific Islander Desi Americans. And I think what's been really amazing is just, I think that young people are really willing to connect, like in between, across ethnic groups, nationalities, and really find those commonalities that we face. And I think that's brought me like a lot of support and joy over the years. AAPI, when we say that, it's such a huge population of people. We're talking about people from several different continents, so many different identities and histories. And there's a lot of historical divides that keep us from, working with each other still. But I think the young people are really willing to work through those and share stories with each other and stand in solidarity with each other.
Talk a little more about that, the differences that you see in how younger people engage, especially with others across ethnic lines, as opposed to older folks. Is it better? Is it worse? Do you see more efforts at understanding?
Well, I think it's just a different, generation that we're living in. Our elders lived through so much, and really we're focusing on like their survival and their for future generations. Now we're seeing an entire generations of young people who are born in America. Many people are multiracial too. And I think that we're seeing a lot of people coming together to sort of be with each other in that way.
Mm-hmm. All right, Edric, the Filipino community in Juneau is closely linked to the local Alaska Native population. That's true of most of coastal Alaska. Tell us about that relationship and how it came to be and how it's changed and evolved.
Yeah, so thanks for the question, Lori. So, in my efforts to learn more about my culture and, just trying to go back to what Lucy said is learning what our elders had to go through, is that, I found that my initial understanding was the Filipino community was for Filipinos, and all I saw were Filipinos. But upon digging up more of the history, is that I learned that it was created in part because there was lots of just racial tensions within Juneau, and that there was an intermingling between Alaska Natives and Filipinos that if somebody had a child that was both, there wasn't really a place for them to call home or have a sense of community. So they were kind of figuring out what they had to do. And so actually a lot of the folks who put in a lot of work were Alaska Native women who had what they called mestizos. So it's like a mix of Filipino and Alaska Natives that really pushed to make the organization happen. And they ended up getting the property here in downtown Juneau, and they created the Filipino Community, which became a home base for many people who didn't have a place to call home or have a sense of community to gather and share each other's culture. And it actually got to the point where folks started breaking down the barriers, where even had Governor Egan was actually a common fixture at the Filipino Hall back in the day when folks were having these tensions, but wasn't afraid to step over the line and enjoy Filipino and Alaska Native culture and the mestizos here in Juneau.
That's such an important point, to have those gathering places that are open to all too, so that people can come in and learn and engage and build relationships, because that's what it all comes down to, is building relationships so that we have more respect and understanding of each other. So that sounds like it was a very good thing to have that opportunity and that development of that place. Lucy, the Polynesian community in Alaska was especially hit hard by COVID-19 during the past year. What are some of the health care factors that played into that, and how is the community working to address those now?
Thank you for the question. Yes, our Pacific Islander in Alaska got hit really hard by COVID. We've seen some loved ones pass on because of COVID, not just with COVID itself, but it mixed with their health or some health issue. And we've seen a lot of this health issue come into our community because we move here in Alaska. It's cold, have 4 seasons. In where we come from, it's just 1 season, and it's just warm all year through. So they get out of the house and they get to work and do some labor work. When they move up here, it's they get this illness. It's either all added up with less exercise, more food, more eating of those not fresh food, but eat I guess frozen food or canned food or so. And some of them, they also come up with some of the medical history, because they come up here to look for better way of medical treatment. And so when they came, it's really hard for them to get to a doctor right away for a health insurance issue, for where they live, or transportation. So all of this, it combined together to where it's really hard for them to get out, in and out. And when COVID hit, a lot of them that pass on were people that also have some other health issues. And some of them, they just had COVID passing on from some other loved ones, because they live in apartments with more multiple families in apartments. So one get hit by COVID, the whole family get hit by COVID. And that's how it got around the community so quickly, and where a lot of them have passed on because of that. So we've seen a lot of that. And Polynesian Association of Alaska met up with some of the leaders in our churches in Anchorage, and where one of our churches, Samoan Assembly of Gods, and the minister's wife agree on opening a door for us to bring the vaccine to the community, because we cannot take the community to the vaccine. And I know that all of us have life to live, and try to take care of family and try to be, isolated from all this through the pandemic. So we've asked the city to please bring the vaccine to the community. I know in my community, every Sunday, mostly every family go to church. And even when COVID was hitting, they will not stop going to church. They still meet at church. So we've decided to bring the vaccine to the community and let the church open their doors up where it's the area, it's a comfortable setting for our community to know that they're going to God's house, and whatever happened there is in God's hand. So they trust people that goes to church. They trust people that are going to be there. They trust the environment, not just going to a clinic or a doctor's office. They don't know anybody, but the doctor, they don't know either.
That
so
does
that's
make sense.
how we got the vaccine.
Yeah, that does make sense that you would bring it to the people in a setting where they have already established a trusting relationship. So that sounds like a great way to have success. I'm so happy to hear that. Kengo, unfortunately, we've seen a rise in anti-Asian racism around the country in recent months. What have you heard through your work in the Anchorage community about this issue and how we can better address discrimination and racism?
Thank you. I think first of all, it's really important for us to recognize this recent sort of flare in the anti-Asian and really broadly immigrant sentiment against immigrants. It's really a continuation of a lot of things over the course of our history. When I think of this, I think of a conversation that I had with my mother, actually, that has really stuck with me. And we were talking about this, and we were privileged to grow up in Fairbanks, where we felt really welcomed by our community. But my mother was talking about after President Trump was elected, she started sort of, there would be these times when she would go into the grocery store out in public or meeting people, and maybe she has like a not a great experience with someone, and kind of the first thing that comes to her mind is, maybe that was because of the way I look or my race. And she said she never used to think about that like that before. And I think it just speaks to sort of the more nuanced and permeating kind of aspect of racism we face here. And I think it really makes a difference who we choose to be these leaders of our town, of our nation, and who we choose to be these figureheads that we're holding up, and that can have a really real effect on how the safety that people feel in their communities, and that they perceive. So
is there one thing?
I think.
Is there one thing that you, in our final couple of minutes here, I'd love to hear from all three of you. One thing that you would want allies and others to do to help promote the idea of more respect, more understanding. What can all Alaskans do to help create more of that harmony that we need so desperately?
I like to say something. I think
sure.
All of us Alaskans should understand or learn about other cultures, because we are growing so huge in Alaska and more cultures are coming in.
So
I think we should all learn and read about it.
Yes, more cultural understanding. Edric.
So, just going back to the point that I mentioned earlier, Lucy reinforces just, learning about other people's culture. And I personally challenge everyone to, instead of making assumptions before meeting someone, just how about you actually have a conversation and learn about their culture. And, in my community, I know that we're very inviting to anybody in the community that's interested in being part of the Filipino community, is that they are welcome, and they're always welcome, and they are never disappointed when they are part of it. So I would challenge anyone in Alaska to reach out, try something new, and experience a different culture.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. This time has flown by. I so appreciate all three of you sharing your time with us this evening. Thank you. Many Asian American and Pacific Islander community groups have planned events to celebrate this month. Be on the lookout for them in your local community. Tonight, we wrap up our final episode of Season 4 of Alaska Insight. However you plan to spend the season of sunlight, have fun, be safe, and we'll be back with you right here next fall with a full lineup of Alaskan stories from all across our state. Alaska Insight will take the summer off, but our hard-working reporters continue to produce stories every day. So be sure to tune in daily to your local public radio station for Alaska Morning News and Alaska News Nightly. Make your voice heard by calling in to Talk of Alaska every Tuesday morning. And for the latest news from across the state, be sure to visit our website, alaskapublic.org. You can sign up there for our free daily news digest so you don't miss important stories. All episodes of Alaska Insight and related video content are at alaskapublic.org/Alaska Insight. Thanks for joining us this evening. We'll be back with all new episodes for Season 5 in September. I'm Lori Townsend. Have a great summer. Good night.